Hi, this is Larry Molinaro, and I am the co-director, along with J. Ernest Green, of the Bach Plus series of Live Arts Maryland. This session of Bach Plus for Thursday, October 22nd, features pianist Dan Tepfer with his series of what he calls Bach Upside Down, his project of inverting all of the Goldberg variations. Let's start by listening to Dan play the Aria from the Goldberg variations, along with its inversion, and then we'll get going in our conversation and further listening with Dan. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Larry. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. So if you don't mind, let's just start with you telling us a little bit about the inversions. So you've set up an algorithm basically so that as you play into the computer, it uses a process to actually turn all of the notes upside down, but that can be done in different ways. So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so inversion is this ancestral process in music that's been used probably since the ancient Greeks, if not before. And it's just the idea that if you take a musical shape, it could be, for example, a melody, but it doesn't have to be a melody. It could also just be a chord, a vertical chord. You define an axis of symmetry and then you flip it like that. So maybe if we start like this, it ends up like that. And what this does is it's very interesting because the results that you get, uh, it seems like listeners can intuitively perceive that they're linked to the original form of the music, but it's distant enough that most of the time we don't notice it consciously. So it's this kind of really it's a sweet spot where it feels like something new and often exciting, but it also doesn't feel too new that it's coming out of left field.
So we're joined right now by Shaughn Dowd, who is the flutist who has been working with us in Bach Plus. Welcome, Shaughn.
Thank you, Larry.
It's great to have you here. And Shaughn and Ben Wensel, who couldn't join us today, recorded the three first canons of the Goldberg variations. So variation 3, 6, and 9. Ben actually has now the canonic voices because they are in the lower part. They've been flipped around. And so Ben played both parts and he just recorded both parts. So that's what you'll be hearing. Shaughn got to play what had been the bass line and is now the melodic line or the upper voice, and often is what I would describe as kind of a perpetuum mobile. So she gets no chance to breathe at all. It's not a very flute-friendly part, but I think she did a fantastic job. So let's take a listen. This is variation number 3.
Wow, that was amazing. It's just really amazing to hear it that way. Fantastic.
It really becomes something different, I think.
Yeah, I have a recording actually of the whole Goldberg variations played on period instruments. I forget the name of the group that did it, but
Yeah, I
but
think
it's always struck me how much of the music it reveals. Because you always hear kind of internal voices will jump out at you in a different way, and it's so valuable.
Well, and I think this idea of chromatic inversion is really interesting too. I've been thinking about this a lot as I've been listening to these variations, and I think in particular with the aria, and also um, I think it may, well, we'll get to some more of this. I think in number 6, which we'll hear, it actually just I'll call it evocative. I can't actually make a cognitive connection here yet, although now I want to go back and look at these pieces. But I think of the Shostakovich 24 Preludes and Fugues, which he wrote in response, as it were, to Well-Tempered Clavier. But there's something about the way in which he is using tonality and chromaticism that actually reminds me of that. These remind me of those pieces. And so other than saying it reminds me of that, I have no other basis. But anyway.
Yeah, I wonder how deep the connection goes because the 24 Preludes and Fugues of Shostakovich, which I absolutely love, are really different in concept from what Bach did, because in Shostakovich he's thinking of his counterpoint kind of modally. He's not being nearly as careful with the moment to moment intervals between notes as Bach is. It's kind of like, okay, here we're in this mode, and so we can have melodies happening in this mode and they will go together. That's as far as I can tell how Shostakovich is thinking, whereas Bach is being incredibly minutious about every single connection between every single note in the tradition of Baroque counterpoint. And so I think that if there's a connection between the two, and I agree that there are moments that jump out at me as sounding almost like Shostakovich, I think it's because the harmony is just so unexpected, and Shostakovich has those moments of just like weird chord, that just kind of give you a little bit of a jolt. And that definitely happens here, even though the actual interval content, at the contrapuntal level is just as finely controlled as the original Bach. It's identically controlled.
Let's go to number 5 for a minute because we'll do these in order. And it's just such a fantastic variation and I think inversion. So here we go with variation number 5.
Had you heard that one before, Shaughn?
No, and while I was listening to it, I thought, oh, thank God Larry did not ask us to do that one.
It was on my list.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you didn't have to do it that fast. I mean, but actually, there's a recording. There's a new recording by a Baroque flautist whom I love, Emmy Ferguson. Do you know Emmy Ferguson?
No, I do not.
I think she's wonderful. She's like my generation, and she's like both a really serious early music flautist, on early music flutes, whatever those are called. Sorry, and a modern flautist. But she has a new record called "Fly the Coop," where she plays some of the Bach flute sonatas with new realizations, because I guess most of them only have figured bass as
It
accompaniment.
depends on the sonata, but yes. So
Some of them.
some of the sonatas are actual trio sonatas where the upper part is actually written out, but then there are continuo sonatas that Shaughn and I have played quite a bit,
Ah,
and then it's correct. The realization is up to the keyboardist.
in one of the sonatas, she actually inserts that variation
Oh,
because the sonata is really quite reminiscent, or at least this particular movement of the sonata is quite reminiscent of that movement of the Goldberg variations, and they're both in G major. So I'm pretty sure it's that variation that she
fascinating.
inserts. Yeah,
Yes.
so keep your eyes peeled for that. It's like later into the CD.
Yeah. I really want us to jump into number 6 because I think there's some really fascinating
Yeah.
sort of procedures that come out of that. So I'm going to take us to variation number 6 first, with the variation played by Dan, and then the inversion played by Shaughn and Ben.
Wow, that's fantastic. I just love hearing it that way. I've spent a lot of time with this material because not only have I done these inversions with the computer, but I also made scores for all of the inverted variations, and really I put a lot of effort into making them very proper and legible, and so I've kind of spent time on how each one of these notes should be spelled and all of that, and it's just wonderful to hear it played by these other instruments. Yeah, it's one of the really cool things about the process that I was using, because I think people have done this kind of inversion before. In fact, since I posted this and since the New York Times did that amazing article about the project, people sent me all kinds of examples of people who'd applied chromatic inversion to Bach in the past. But I think the challenge is that every example that I heard of it was done in a pretty dry way. I think what was lacking in the examples that I heard was like a real investment in making it work as well as it possibly can musically. I'm talking like literally to convince people that this works. And part of that work of convincing is to, for example, slow down at the end of sections or just do these things that are very natural when we play a piece. And so what's nice about this inversion process that I use is that every interpretive choice that I was making in the original is reproduced exactly in the inversion.
But I think this is a good opportunity to tell my story about my husband coming in while I was practicing. I'm pretty sure it was number 3 though. But my husband Dan is not a musician, but he listens all the time to all different styles and genres. It's just incredible. And he comes in while I'm practicing, and he says, "Are you practicing a Goldberg variation?"
Wow.
And I'm actually practicing the inversion. He goes, "Yes, I listen to Soft Machine. I don't really listen to Soft Machine. This is a group from I think the 60s, and I have a feeling I should have looked them up beforehand, but they're a jazz rock fusion."
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, they used that they did that variation." And I said, "Well, it's an inversion." He said, "Oh, yes."
Wow, we got to dig this up.
I know, we have.
I would be amazed if they actually did a chromatic inversion of it, but I wonder what he's referring to. I want to find out.
I'll get more information from him and send it to you, because I was blown away. I thought I'd better go back to school and start studying.
It's cool that he was able to hear that it was a Goldberg variation.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say, variation 3, I think of all the variations, is also one of the ones that gave me the most trouble, because you're playing this left hand, kind of moto perpetuo. And the reality is that on piano, we pay more attention to the upper voices.
Right.
And so, I've worked on that left hand quite a bit, but I'll tell you, when you turn it upside down, every minute flaw in phrasing is really magnified. And so it was actually a fantastic practice tool for me, because it forced me to go back into this left hand and get it and a lot more melodically correct and really singing than I had it before.
Bach, what I was going to say is back to number 3. Bach is hard, and I desperately wanted to bring out the line, in my part a little bit more, but couldn't. But I just wanted it to flow a little bit better. But that was really hard to make it fit with Ben's part and within the constraints of being pre-recorded, and it's just. It's amazing. Bach is just absolutely amazing.
Yes,
I had originally thought, well, let's have violin on the top line because it's more string-like and it'd be easier. Right. But I love the color of the flute. So.
There's something so powerful about having separate timbres. It actually makes it a lot easier to listen to the different voices.
Exactly. So let's listen to number 9. I'm going to go put that on right now.
Well, that was beautiful. That
That,
just worked so well.
that one worked well. I love that one. There was one section, Larry and I were discussing whether I should play it on alto flute, but the range was such that it just didn't fit well at all. It would have put the alto too high, and it's not a good range for the sound wise. So
Mhm.
I just had to move a couple of things. So it sort of um, maybe changed this the feel a little bit. But this was really a lovely one to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded great to me. There's the recording of the entire Goldbergs on guitar, amazingly enough, by I think a Czech guitarist or maybe Hungarian named
Mm.
József Ötvös. That sounds Hungarian, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he does quite a bit of octave displacement
Ah.
to make it fit. And I think, mostly it just works perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, beautiful playing. I love that.
It's good when
Yeah, I think of the three, that one worked best in this with these constraints, right? Where you
Mhm.
had pre-recorded lower parts and then Shaughn had to layer in on top.
Mm-hmm.
I think they all, I mean, again, what I would say is they all worked well. But the 3 and 6 present the problem of, I think, just trying to record them in the way that we did in particular, because it doesn't give, I mean, Shaughn and I, certainly Shaughn, I think what you encounter in variation 3 isn't dramatically different from some of the Bach writing in the sonatas. It's just
No.
you can take a breath.
Right.
Because we agree that,
We
you'll take a breath.
right. We agree ahead of time, but
Right.
I thought, what am I going to do? There's absolutely nowhere to breathe.
Right.
But you did it though.
All right, so variation 10. Now, what you're going to hear is, first of all, you're playing the variation, but then this is one that I love to play on the organ because of the sort of the fugal process, right? I think of fugue as a process as opposed to a form per se, although, it is obviously both. But what Bach is doing here, and it's interesting in the inversion that it sort of changes the register overall.
Mhm.
But I'm playing it on a full organ sound, and I'm using a sound that Bach would have known. It's the Silbermann organ of the St. Peter's Church in Freiburg, the Petrikirche. And here's another nice thing about modern technology. I have a program called Hauptwerk, so I can actually play these instruments on the organ in my living room. It's not a sample that has been spread out over the keyboard. They actually have recorded every pipe of the instrument. And so these files are massive, but it's a great sound. So we'll start by hearing Dan play the variation straight down, and then you'll be hearing me playing the inversion on the Petrikirche Silbermann organ.
man, I love it. It just sounds great. Beautiful playing, Larry. Yeah, it's fantastic. And I love, I mean, that sample is just like you're there in the church. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, they've captured the room. You can play it in different ways.
Mhm.
Yeah, the only thing at the end there, I just had to fight every instinct that I had to not put my left foot down on a low G because I just
Well,
wanted to.
yeah, I kind of hear, but in some ways, I actually feel like, did you leave out the low D, or is it like
Now that the
somehow
low
if
C is there, what you're hearing is that because of the layering of, the organ, of course, in this kind of setting is playing at, not only do we have your inversion, but it's actually playing all sorts of harmonics, right?
yeah.
When I put on mixtures, you're actually getting a reinforcement of fifths, upper octaves, and even
Yeah.
thirds at spots. So.
Right. So I guess because the D is on the bottom, its harmonics are not being reinforced all that much, not as much as the other as the G anyway. So actually, your final chord sounds more like a G minor on the organ than it does on
Right,
piano.
right.
But I don't know if you noticed, I didn't do it on these on this Bach upside down thing where I really try to do it properly with like good sound and everything and do it seriously. But earlier I did some of these Bach upside downs much more casually. I was just recording them with my phone, and I would sometimes add a low G at the
Oh,
end.
okay. Yeah, no. Well, there you go. So yeah, we had the same instinct on that one. So
Yeah.
yeah, so good. Okay. Well, now number 13, this one actually was hard to record because, again, I just have it in my head in a certain way. And so the way in which you're approaching ornaments are lovely, but they're just different than what I do. So I was, feeling like I needed to follow the score, partly just because of the inversion. So you'll note the tension, right? So I need to
Yeah,
go
well,
back
you
and
know, this raises an interesting question. So when I was making these scores, part of me wanted to just present it exactly like the original Bach, where obviously the ornamentation is not written in, right? But the problem with that, to just put some kind of an ornamentation symbol on top of the notes, right? The problem with that is that the type of ornamentation that's required is actually this inverted ornamentation that is different from any ornamentation that we normally would use. And so that's why I decided to write out the ornaments the way that I do them, which I fully realize, that's not the way that other people might want to do them.
so here's what I did on this one. So first of all, actually to your point, that was actually how I got through it. Because I was reading through these and I thought, all right, the only way I'm going to be able to get this recorded is to actually ignore what you had written out and to pretend it was just an ornamentation mark. So you'll hear that what I do is different where those are actual ornaments. The other thing is because this flips it and puts what had been this very elaborate melody, right? This, what I would call an ornamented chorale in the bass. I took the registration from the French practice, which is the basse de, either a basse de trompette or basse de Crowmorn. I'm using the basse de Crowmorn because it's much more vocal, but it is a common practice in French organ music to have this kind of elaborate line in the bass while you have a very gentle upper part. This is variation 13, starting with the variation played straight by Dan, and then on a French style organ by me.
Man, that's fantastic. I absolutely love it. Wow, what a great choice with the registration, using that trumpet sound. I mean, it really makes that low melody work perfectly.
Yeah, it's so I obviously I want to do this again. But the yeah, that's actually the what's called a Crowmorn. So it's a reed,
Mhm.
not quite as powerful as the trumpet, but or the trumpet in the that would be on the French organ, but it has more of a clarinet feel, right? The overtones tend to favor the fifth, actually. So it has this very round sound, but with the tremulant, it's just beautiful. And so what I was trying to do, and then I got my own way, was actually adopt that sort of French style of playing, which again is very subtle, very vocal, and a lot of flexibility. And then in the upper part, they're very straightforward, right? And I think probably if I do it again, I would just use the 8-foot flute, not the 8 and the 4, which gives it an octave. But anyway, but I thought that the inversion just worked beautifully.
Absolutely. Yeah. Did you hear the recording of this that Alessio Bach did on piano?
I did not.
Do you know Alessio Bach? Are you familiar with him? Really, really great classical pianist. Has toured a lot with Joshua Bell,
Right.
but also is a great soloist. Yeah, he's an old friend of mine, and he recorded this particular variation on piano, and
Okay, so I'll have to go look
it's
that up.
really beautiful. And he told me that he it really took him quite some time to figure out what to do with it, and what he ended up having to do was to go back and forth between the original and the inversion to kind of remember, oh, that's what this is trying to do here.
Exactly. I'm glad to hear you say that because last night, again, we were sort of doing this at the last minute.
Mhm.
That was the only way I got through it, right? Two things. One was to actually know where you were writing out ornaments and just to say, I'm just going to replace it with an ornament sign and play an
Mhm.
ornament.
Yeah.
But then I started off by singing in my head the straight version of it,
Mhm.
so that I could actually figure out what the relationship was because it's hard. it's
Yeah, well, I think you really made the melody work beautifully. I did have a couple questions. That's why in the middle of it I got out the score, about a couple of the ornaments in the first half of the A section. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a couple of them you're approaching from the opposite direction from what I wrote. Is that possible?
it is possible, and I wouldn't stand by anything I did because it was sort of in the moment, and so I wouldn't say that. And I realized you were actually inverting them,
Well,
and so I probably made the choice to play it more of an ornament, so that it ended up not being an inversion.
Well, I think it's a really interesting kind of theoretical question because ultimately ornaments are kind of outside of counterpoint, right? And in fact, Bach sometimes gets away with murder by having something be an ornament and hence not having to justify it contrapuntally, and in fact, in variation 2028 of the Goldberg variations, he really plays on that idea of a trill, like which is the note? Which is the note of the
Right,
two? There are two notes.
right,
Which is
right.
the note? Is
Exactly.
it this one or that one? And he's constantly playing with that idea. So this is all this I think is totally open to question in terms of if an ornament is inverted, should the ornament be inverted or does it remain an ornament in the same way as it
Yeah,
was before?
I'm glad you're raising this because I think my instincts would be to treat it as an ornament because, again, if I'm in the interest of making it sort of a piece of music, right? The inversion itself is interesting, but it would become a little bit almost OCD to say you have to treat absolutely everything in this fashion. Um,
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Or it would enable us to discover a whole other side of ornamentation that might some interesting doors.
There are a lot of French ornaments from that time. I mean, ornamentation varies widely from decade to decade, from country to country, and there are a lot of French ornaments that actually start from the low. They actually come in from below, right? So
See, this is something I don't know about.
Yeah, so I think what I'll do is take, and I had that in my head somewhat, but anyway, it's worth continually relooking at this. Well, Dan, I know that you have a hard stop coming up in about 3 minutes or even less. So just wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us and to to talk us through some of this and to listen together to some of these variations.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure, Larry. This is so cool. As I was saying, some classical pianists have played some of these, Alessio Bach and Renata Gutmann, um, but aside from that, you're the first person to transpose these to other instruments, you and Ben and Shaughn. So thank you so much for doing that, because I think it really makes me hear the Goldbergs anew. It's just so fresh, and to have them on other instruments just increases the freshness even more. And it's just this kind of amazing way of hearing it through another lens.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And Shaughn, thank you for being game to jump in and do this at the last
You're
minute.
welcome. Thanks for
Yeah, thank you, Shaughn.
All right. And thanks to Dan and to Shaughn and to Ben for all of the work they did for this week's Bach Plus. And we'll end by listening to Variation 14, played by Dan straight through and then via disc clavier in inversion. Thanks again for joining us.